Thank you, Demeric, for bringing us into the room mentally and spiritually, and Natasha for reminding us that movements don't just live in ideas. They live in the spirit, they live in bodies, and we have to nurture all of them equally. So thank you. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. It was so fitting that Demeric shared those, and they are the theme of this session. I often say that the universe finds a way to connect us in ways that we don't always understand. Dr. King wrote those words, right? That we are tied in a single garment of destiny in response to white clergymen who told him to be patient, to stop protesting and wait for a better time. They asked him to follow law and order, even when those laws were unjust. But King replied, his famous words, "Justice too long delayed is justice denied." He reminded them that comfort should not be the enemy of progress and that movements do not begin in convenience, they begin in urgency. He said that the church and all its leaders must not simply be thermostats reflecting the climate of the times, but not just be thermometers, reflecting the climate of the times, but thermostats, changing it. And so young people today are both. They sense the temperature and they work to change it. They're not waiting. They are organizing, they're building, they're resisting, they're reimagining, they are leading. And so this session, the conversation you will all hear, witness, receive, draws its theme from Dr. King's words, because we are not isolated individuals or separate movements. We are stitched into that garment. And what affects one of us affects all of us. This session is about listening to and learning from young people who are shifting systems locally, nationally, and globally towards justice. This is not just a panel. It is a response, a refusal, a reminder. I want to invite my panelists to start coming to the stage as we continue to set the context. I want to invite Iziko Calderon, youth leader and organizer for the LA Opportunity Youth Collaborative. Come on up. Ana Fuentes from the Amanecer People's Project of El Paso, Texas. Come on up. Dana Catalan, Youth Advisory Group member, Global Opportunity Youth Network, Mexico. Come on up. Asana Bruce, Children's Defense Fund and Black Student Leader Ambassador at Tennessee State University. Come on up. And Sequoia Coleman, NorCal organizer for the California Native Vote Project. I feel like I need to be saying, come on up, like come on, like Bob Barker. I'm old. So before we get started, I need to turn and look at y'all. Before we get started, I just want to set the context here in LA. And before we jump into our first question, ground us in the city we're in, right? Because it's not just a setting, it's not just a backdrop. It's a place whose history is deeply tied to the story of justice, resistance, transformation, and transformation in this country. Going back to the original inhabitants of the LA basin, those who lived here originally and are still inhabiting the land, which had been cared for by the Tongva, the Tataviam, the Serrano, the Quiche, the Chumash, people whose stewardship of the land and community long predates colonization, reminding us that democracy and mutual care have deep indigenous roots here. The Zoot Suit riots of 1934, young Mexican-American men targeted for the clothing they wore because it was offensive to the dominant culture, right? And in the face of that discrimination, they wore those Zoot Suits proudly. In 1968, East LA high school students walked out of classrooms demanding equal education. Many were just teens, 15 to 18 years old. In LA, in 1992, during the LA uprisings, after the acquittal of police officers' beating of Rodney King, the city rose up, right? And it wasn't just about one verdict. It was a response to decades of systemic injustice. And for over 50 years, the Los Angeles LGBT Center, they're in the room, I know. Yeah, please raise your hand, raise the roof, shout it out, yeah. For over 50 years, they have been providing life-saving supports, advocacy, and visibility for queer and trans Angelinos. Their work reminds us that equity must include gender and sexuality justice too, because we are all stitched to that garment of destiny, that unified garment of destiny. And so I want to start by turning my attention finally to the panelists, right? And starting with you, Iziko, linking, right, the history of the city, these movements, the work to promote democracy and inclusive societies to the work you do here in LA. Can you tell us about that work and how it builds on the deep roots of justice in your city?
Yes. Let me speak to y'all for a second. And I know we had a beautiful spoken word, but I have a little bit of attitude with what I'm about to say, so I'm probably gonna stand. Okay. I have been serving the community before I understood the technicalities of it. I was always involved in posadas on my street and had mature conversations with randos on the bus to visitations since 6 years old. As a teen, I realized that I was constantly running towards community and would rather invest in others than myself. I turned 18 within the foster system, prepared to go homeless, took advantage to heal and let myself free. What happened to me was by design, and I didn't care because my protection given for Viracocha didn't either. I spoke to people about injustices I witnessed or had happened to me, and someone listened and saw potential and fire in my heart. They told me that rage was in the right place. After winning a lawsuit and finding another system to be housed, I was connected to the OYC and to continue what I was meant to do and been perfecting it for 3 years now. Giving youth the tools to share and take power back while building community and trusting yourself. I was raised to embody the fears of my father, being deported to where I thought that would be me too, if I wasn't careful. And now it's more possible. That fear remains constant on top of the fact that I am indigenous, brown, queer, and trans. But I have the autistic tendency to use my brain to insanity, like my mom, who is still in the streets today because she would rather be insanely aware than complacent to a system that preyed on mothers' suicide and profit from loss of suffering like children like me. The strategy is new, the intentions are old and the same. War is now incorporated in daily life and revolution is individualized. The consensus theory of truth, specifically in what is emancipatory, it states that what is going to be true has been declared. They have been telling us their strategy, divide and conquer. Ignorance is bliss, but we don't hear bells until it's your body, my choice. Democracy in the US government has been taken way out of context, and at this point is a shell they hide behind, but can't anymore because they're eating that too. We can see it now, but it's too late. That's the last of it. Now we're stuck with starting anew, or how many species we're willing to sacrifice, traditions, indigenous knowledge, cultures, diversity, over it all. This is a state of willpower. We have survived so much unnecessary suffering. Our epigenetics reflect that. Unnecessary to us, but necessary to those who rig the scale to their favor. Survival is rooted in memory. The individual is an illusion. Relevancy is based on perspective or experience. Neuroplasticity leads to evolution. What makes me special is that I remember, healed, and integrated my lived experience early in life. I understood that I am a result of butterfly effects, and I can create more. I believe everyone is important because I live. Billionaire believe that too, but not in the same framework. Within thin lines like these, this is to our advantage so we can shape it into balance. I have the privilege to my knowledge and setting, so I took advantage to go to Mexico before Trump took office, and I looked for the answers that my ancestors knew. If you make childhood safe to thrive, you have a start to a healthy, tight-knit community. Children aren't accounted for or considered in a majority of spaces here in LA. But in Mexico, it's encouraged. They'll say things like, para toda la familia. Bring your family, bring your kids. Youth is sacred and was respected. Now it's a phase of life instead of a pillar to adulthood. Therefore, a promising future. Children need their respect to be respectful, but it falls off when not practiced. And now it's become a culture noticed by other nations, but assimilation to the people that live in America. I was trying to talk to some youth in China, and they think we're culturally rude and audacious. So much grief of childhood not had or respected keeps us in a loop of communal debt. Like, who was there for that child, mother, father, generations, ancestry? To the point that I have to search way back in my ancestry through the Akashic and ground myself in what once was in hopes to bringing it back into a modern way. I will introduce myself a little briefly. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Imaynayamka Tkanki Sutika Iziko. That's my name. Professionally, I'm a Los Angeles-born young leader trying to specialize in cross-sector alignment for change of practice, culture, and policy. Through my lived experience, I speak for authentic youth engagement, holistic policy, and program development, and restorative justice. Also safety, rooted in trust, not control, of course. Introduction as a human. I have proud roots in my DNA, indigenous of South America. Second born from immigrant mother, first born from father. Foster care, Cop City, mental and health system impacted. Gariwarmi trans, queer, and autistic. Thank you for your grace and presence.
In their own words, right? Beautiful. So thank you, Iziko, because you took us from you here in LA and just zoomed out, right? And your connection to community, to the world. Before we move on to hear from our other panelists, I want to invite you all, right? If you hear something that inspires you, that moves you, that touches you, right? To ask yourself, right? How can I partner with these young people? How can I be an ally, right? How can I, at times, step aside and walk with them and let them lead and follow them? If you hear something that challenges you, I want to invite you all to ask yourself why. Sit in that discomfort, right? And ask yourself what it is you need to learn, unlearn, right? To understand this thing that you're hearing, right? That may challenge you, right? Because you never know. You might find the answer to a question that you've been asking yourself all your life. So thank you, Iziko. I'm going to now just zoom out a little, right? We were in LA. Let's zoom out a little to other parts of the US. I'm going to turn to you, Sequoia, Anna, and Asana, to share a bit about your work and how it connects to efforts to promote justice and battle inequities.
Absolutely. Estongo, Sequoia Georgia Cross. I'm a member of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma and Muskogee on my mother's side and Black on my father's side. I was born and raised on traditional Nisenan land, which is Sacramento, up north, and I have been a community organizer, specifically in Northern California, with the California Native Vote Project for about 2.5 years now. But before I actually worked for CMVP, I was a part of our youth programs for about maybe 3-4 years. So this work is very much deeply rooted in my personal and collective experience. Our work directly addresses injustice and inequity by challenging the systems that have historically excluded Native people from civic life and political decision-making. As our name suggests, voting is part of what we do, but it's much more than that. We engage in integrated voter engagement year-round, not just during elections. We recognize that Native communities have been systemically disenfranchised, so we meet people where they are, through outreach to tribal communities, webinars, and breaking down complex legal jargon so that people can feel empowered, not intimidating by the voting process. We help Native people not only register to vote, but also feel confident and informed enough to make decisions that impact their futures, especially in local elections where change can happen just by one vote. But voting is just one part of the strategy. Our broader mission is power building across tribal communities statewide. We start with young people, ages 12 to 24, through our youth programs. Every monthly meeting includes mental health support, political education, and community organizing skills. This model recognizes that you can't create change in your community if you're not also caring for yourself, understanding your history, and building the tools to act. We see our youth as future leaders, and we aim to give them everything they need to return back to their communities to be able to lead transformative change. In essence, our work confronts injustice by creating space for Native youth and communities to reclaim their political voice, build collective power, and design solutions rooted in healing, history, and action.
Thank you, thank you. Anna, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, you guys can hear me? Good? All right, thank you. Well, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Fuentes. I'm the director of Amanecer People's Project. I am originally from Mexico, but I moved to El Paso when I was just a kid. And now El Paso is my home. It's where I want to live the rest of my life and build opportunities for my people to stay in our community instead of going elsewhere to search for them, right? So Amanecer People's Project, we work to wrestle decision-making power away from the polluting elite and place it back in the hands of everyday El Pasoans. So it's us who are making the decisions that affect our lives, and it's us who are building the future that we deserve. We're a membership-led organization, and what that means is that our members own and have accountability and ownership over our work and our campaigns. Most recently, after going door to door in our community, asking people, what are some problems that you're having with the city, what are some tensions that you're having? We identified the lack of refrigerated air in schools, serving immigrant working class students as a symptom of the divestment that our children are experiencing in our school district. So we've been able to bring in our parents, students, teachers into our campaign, organizing them, mobilizing them to take action. And our work has been able to course correct the direction that our district was moving in. So last November, a board majority backed by private interests passed a school closure plan, a mass school closure plan. And thanks to our work, not only were we able to flip that board majority to be a progressive majority for the first time in El Paso earlier this month, just yesterday, our members spoke before that board in favor of opening up those schools that were closed last November, and the board voted yes. Thank you. So we're taking our people through this campaign arc. We made sense of that initial loss together, that delusion, that hopelessness feeling that we can sometimes feel as a result of these systems failing, and are pushing our people to dream bigger and demonstrating to them what we can do when we organize together, what we can win, right? The different world that we can build. So now we have actual leveraging power in our schools, and we can have co-governing power over our public education system for the first time in El Paso. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Azana Bruce, a proud Memphian hailing from D901, Memphis, Tennessee, and I attend Tennessee State University, a proud HBCU leader. And I am here today to represent the Children's Defense Fund as a Black Student Leadership Network ambassador. Thank you. And with BSLN, we are standing in a legacy of what BSLN was founded in. With the Children's Defense Fund, the BSLN worked together and created a network of over 600 youth and young people to promote freedom schools in southern communities, in rural and urban communities, to help combat the marginalized issues that we were facing. And now, this past year, my cohort with the fellows and the ambassadors, we worked together across HBCU and PWI campuses across the nation to really hone in on the issues that we were facing together. And with that, we were able to create sustainable campaigns to promote in our communities and implement them in our universities. And some of those campaigns included poverty campaigns, children and women's literature clubs, and even how to combat university DEI program cuts. And thank you. And I am very proud of the work that we have done together. And we are rooted in the legacy of the Ella Baker Training Institute. We are rooted in the legacy of the giants that came before us, the shoulders that we stand on to continue to work and to continue the efforts to address these issues in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to continue to zoom out a bit. Let's travel over to Ciudad Mexico. Dana, can you help us understand, right, how your work in Mexico connects with what's currently happening in the United States.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you so much for this space. It's an honor to be here with all of you and be part of this closing session alongside youth leaders who, like me, believe in the power of organizing, cross-border solidarity, and truth as a driving form of transformation. That's why it's important that we, as young people, go beyond the discourse. We must take action to create proposals, policies, and joint solutions for the problems we share. As you see, I'm going to read a little bit because one of the barriers there in Mexico City that the young people face is the English language. Fortunately, I am a person that has the fortune to have a visa to come here because the other people of my community cannot, but I'm here to represent their voices. Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, my community support me, help me to structure my speech, to get through my anxiety, you know, this bad habit of my generation to have neurodivergence. Yeah, so I take my pill to anxiety before this, so now I'm more relaxed. Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Danae Catalan, and I'm part of the youth advisory group of GOYN there in Mexico. What is GOYN? It's a global network committed to empowering young people who have been historically excluded from the educational and employment system. In my role, I work to create spaces where youth don't just have access to mentors or training, but where they are here, where they can express themselves, lead, and transform their communities. Through workshops in social justice, narrative change, employer engagement, entrepreneurship platforms, and advocacy with local governments, we aim to break a system that constantly tells us that we are not worthy, that we don't know, and that we can't. But obviously we can. The Youth Advisory Group there in Mexico, it's a proof. We explore critical topics like the care system as an issue historically made invisible. We see that yet one that directly impacts our access and development. In many communities, it is young people, especially young women, who take on unpaid caregiving responsibilities, looking after children, siblings, grandparents, or relatives with disabilities or illnesses. This work, while essential to the life and sustainability, it's neither recognized nor valued by the system, and it deeply limits our opportunities to study, work, or practice in public life. If we want to talk about justice, we must begin redistributing, recognizing, and making care visible as a collective right, not as an individual burden. And it hasn't been an easy road, no, obviously, no, but as young people, we often face adult-centered attitudes that render us invisible, or we listened about the tokenism, the tokenism before. So this happens in local government. Invite us in symbolical, but without really taking our voices into real decisions or producing real change. But we haven't stopped. We have persisted and opened space for legislative advocacy, proving that our generation doesn't just have ideas, we also have the determination to act on them. We have also taken our work to our communities by facilitating workshops on the value of care work, bringing a historical invisible topic into public spaces. And this has been another major challenge. It requires empathy and persistence, but we are convinced that every conversation, as we are having this conversation, contributes to build a more just society, one where care is recognized, value, and guarantee for all. My activism is born from a deep commitment to social justice, radical democracy, and human rights. In our communities in Mexico, we face the structural violence, impunity, inequality, and racism. But our struggles aren't isolated. What we experience in my country, Mexico, is intimately connected to what's happening here in the United States and all across North America. Migration, economic, and security policies impact us all because borders don't stop injustice, but they don't stop our resistance either.
All right. So we see hyper-local, national, and across the border. I want to zoom back in to the U.S. a bit and really explore the role of young people in nurturing and preserving democracy. But I want to share a little brief story. I had the I hope it's not a once-in-a-lifetime privilege, but a huge privilege recently to spend some time with young leaders, young professionals, Eastern Europe and Central Europe. And they were having deep conversations based on texts rooted, texts by Western white philosophers. However, the one text that they were studying and discussing was Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And that's why I say the universe finds ways to connect things, right? The theme of today, the Merrick's poem, spoken word piece, and this panel. And I asked them, right, as a group of young professionals between the ages of 25 to 35 in Central and Eastern Europe, right, why this text? Right? I know why it's special to me, why it's special to us, but why this text? And they said, we were born days, weeks, months after a brutal revolution, after the fall of communism, the execution of a brutal dictator that killed our grandparents, our family. We weren't alive during that time, but we remember because we will not let ourselves forget. And they said, as we look to the West, it seems like there are a lot of forces that want you all to forget. And then they said something that still gives me chills. They said, we will remember for you, and we will remind you. And I just thought, wow, that is young people preserving, right? Working to preserve democracy in one way or the other. And so, just so you know, there are young people halfway around the world, right, that are remembering for you, that are standing with you, right? But I want to zoom back into the U.S. And how do you see the role of young people in the U.S., right, in the preservation of democracy? And what role have young people played in the past and are playing today to address inequity? What lessons has history taught us, and what new lessons are we learning today? So I'll open that up to Sequoia, Ana, Asana, and Iziko, and then we'll zoom back out a little later. Ana, thank you.
I'll start off. So I'll start actually with my best friend who earned her political science degree from UC Santa Cruz. She wrote her thesis on how the US Constitution was influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy. But instead of fully embracing the indigenous governance principles like collective decision-making and the balance of power, the US government misunderstood and even contradicted them. So while democracy as an idea has potential, the actual practice in this country has been flawed from the beginning. You don't have to look that far to see that. In 1969, young college-aged Native organizers launched the occupation of Alcatraz, which lasted 19 months. It wasn't just a protest, it was a powerful call for self-determination. The organizers said, "We moved to Alcatraz because Indian people needed a cultural center of their own after theirs had burned down in the Bay. Without it, we're afraid the old Indian ways may be lost." They didn't just focus on the issues in the Bay, though. They also named systemic issues Native communities still face today, such as water rights, land access, and social and economic inequality. That action wasn't just ancient history, it was only a generation ago, and the impacts are still alive. When I was in our youth group, we had the incredible chance to visit Alcatraz and hear directly from Leneda Warjack, who was one of the original organizers for the occupation of Alcatraz. Being able to walk around the island and listen to her tell us her stories, knowing that she was my age at the time when she helped lead that movement, was life-changing. It showed me that I didn't have to wait to be older or more experienced to make an impact. I just need to be ready to step into that work. And my now supervisor was the one who actually empowered me to be where I am today. After that trip, I dove into community organizing headfirst and started working for CMVP only a couple months later. It proves that when young people connect with our history, we're not just inspired, we're activated. We see our place in the movement and we understand that we are the continuation of generations who have always fought for something better to come.
Thank you. I think this question gets at generally like, does democracy as an idea work, right? And I do believe that it does, but it's an ideal that we need to work towards achieving every single day, not just around election cycles, not just when we need people's votes, right? So this requires talking to people every day, meeting them where they're at, making sense of these system failings together, and then bringing them into organization. And it requires talking to just not people who come out every November, or not just people who can vote, right? But people who are closest to the problems and therefore closest to the solutions. And a story that comes to mind recently in our work was canvassing around one of the schools that I mentioned earlier that is set to close, a high immigrant serving school, high performing school, but they're still planning on closing it. And when I knocked the door of this grandmother, we talked about how trustees, school board trustees, are the ones, the decision makers who are affecting her and her grandkids, and how in El Paso, these decisions, these elections are made up by less than 3% of registered voters in El Paso. So when I shared this information with her, all in Spanish, by the way, she was fired up. She was ready to take action, go to the voting booths, and she told me her voting plan. And when she told me where she was going to go vote, it was a location that's been closed in El Paso for over 2 years. So what that tells me, what that means is that in those 2 years, no one's talked to this woman, no one's made sense of her pain, no one's made sense of her frustrations, talked to her about what are your frustrations with the city, with the schools, with the country. No one from our side, that is, right? Like the opposition is very well organized, their media apparatus is targeting my community, my people, but no one from our side had been there to push her. So it's super clear to me that in this moment what we need is power building organizations like Amanecer, because we are the ones that are keeping democracy alive by building a bigger we. This business as usual approach to democracy assumes that democracy has always been and always will be. It's leaving behind a lot of our people. So now more than ever, we need to be clear about the intergenerational, class-based organizing that needs to get done in order to get closer to making democracy not just the ideal, but the reality that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And you know what's great about having awesome panelists is that you don't have to ask every single question because they connect them. So. You talked about whether or not democracy as an idea works, right? There are things that are working, things that are not so much, right? You gave some great examples of that. So I'll turn to you, Asana. What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? What do we need to correct?
Yes. Thank you all for that. And when I'm thinking about that question, I think about the student movements. I think about how they started in HBCU campuses. I think about Diane Nash and the Freedom Riders. How when they were met with the threat of violence from police, she responded, "We're ready. We signed our wills last night." They were prepared to lay down their lives to fight for justice because they couldn't let violence overcome nonviolence. I think about the Greensboro 4 NCAT and North Carolina A&T and how 4 men dared to defy the racist and segregationist laws that were surrounding their community. How it was young people that pushed for that effort, they pushed for change. And I think about now, in my generation, we cannot be afraid. You have to be motivated by something. And if you're not motivated by ambition, be motivated by fear. The fear that you might not get to see tomorrow, the fear that your grandmother, everything that she fought for, will be erased, the fear that your kids might not even have the opportunity to fight for a better tomorrow because their rights are being stripped away. And what I want us to remember, one thing that I think we're getting wrong is that if you stand by in a situation of injustice, then you too are just as complicit. You are participating in a system that continues to exploit us, that continues to exploit our community. But one thing that I think that we are getting right, our community, our generation, is that we are looking back at the past. We're looking back at our ancestors and their fights and their strategies and things like that. But we are building our fight, our organizing, and we are rooted in love. We're rooted in BWMP. We're rooted in the healing structures that heals our community so that we can make sure that we're not also combating the injustices, but we are laying down the foundation for the next generation to heal, to understand, to remember, but to also be appreciative of the land that we were raised on, appreciative of the works that were laid down before us. And that, with these strategies, we can create a better tomorrow. We are. That it's not far-fetched, that we can do this. We are doing it right now. And I think about even my school, my alma mater, Tennessee State University, and other HBCUs across the nation, and how we are trying to come back the federal executive orders and things like that. And I just remember that we have the tools, we have the power, it's in us. We just have to wake up and be ready to fight for it.
Thank you, Asana. And you mentioned, learning from our ancestors, coming together, being willing. If you're not motivated by ambition, be motivated by fear, right? I think it's important that we learn to tap into all of the things that are going to energize us, right? They're going to bring us together, that are going to inspire us, because it is, and come together, right? Regardless of identity, regardless of where you're from, either within the country or across global borders. And many of the isms we see, right, the othering, right, are deeply connected to each other in ways that are sometimes very obvious, in ways that may be less obvious, but it's still there. So I want to talk a bit, I'd love to hear from you all a bit about the intersectionality, right, of these things, and specifically focusing on intersectionality and immigration. I'll turn to you first, Iziko. From your perspective, can you share how immigration, migration, and racism are connected, including how addressing these intersections could aid our justice work?
Yes. So I will start by saying, again, this will tie in all the other questions as well. But the Chicano movement is still happening. It started with youth and the families working in the fields. And LA is nothing without Mexico. We are a self-capable state because of immigrants who, for some Latin Americans, have more right to the land than the whites who alienate them. Back when borders weren't guarded, trade gates weren't kept by the elites. We were all familiar with each other and governing with respect without mentioning freedom, because we are. Our people don't deserve a fragile government. It is not for us, and it wasn't made by us, as Sequoia was mentioning. It is, as an abolitionist perspective, which is where I'm rooted from mostly in my work, we need to deconstruct and reconstruct this whole democracy and the way it works. We need to name it differently. Democracy as an idea is good. Again, it has good roots. It's been inspired by something that worked well for generations and ancestry. But how come we keep playing into the same games that are rigged or not by voting without proper representation? This was the reason why I didn't vote, and many of my peers didn't either. Even though I didn't vote, I still participate in my local community and, public speaking. When I have to speak for the people that are with me here in this city. So I still have hope, but I have to really, I'm here to be real with y'all. I really feel like we need to fully restructure and deconstruct what we think democracy is, because they're used to the way we're playing it currently, and it's not going well, and we don't deserve that. None of us, none of our futures, and none of our beautiful ideas, they will go to die at some point. And yeah, it's like really a culture change. Again, rooted in ancestry and awareness of each other and our development and our commitment to our community.
Thank
That's
you,
my
Iziko. Yes, go, yeah, you want to clap? Please do. I know that there, I think almost everyone wanted to respond to this, so I want to honor that. I'll, Adana, I know you wanted to share, so we can go down the line. I'll keep an eye on the time, because we do also want to get to some Q&A, but we've still got about 10 minutes, so go for it.
So we are witnessing intensified attacks on migrant rights. From our perspective in Mexico, immigration, migration, and racism are deeply interconnected, even if racism is discussed less openly there in Mexico than here in the US. Racism in Mexico exists, though it is often more silent or less visible. There is widespread colorism, discrimination against indigenous and Afro-Mexican communities, and rejection of Central America migrants. All of these forms of racism continue to harm and exclude many people. The criminalization of migrants, it's a form of racism that seeks to control and exclude those arriving from other countries. Border violence, deportations, and detention centers are examples of how this system dehumanizes and punishes people for migrating. For a strong and just movement, we must acknowledge how these problems are connected. We cannot fight for migrant rights without also fighting against racism, and vice versa. We must create narratives that honor all people, demand laws that protect their rights, and form cross-border alliances rooted in solidarity and mutual support. We cannot truly hear the concerns of these directly affected if we don't seek answers in the right places. It's unlikely we'll hear their voices in law schools or academic libraries. Perhaps we are listening in the wrong places. To push for real change, we must go to the borders, migrant communities, detention centers, and ESL classrooms to truly understand the migrant experiences. And obviously, with this information, make informed decisions. This is how we can address the roots of injustice and build fairer societies, where migration is seen as a vital part of shared richnesses and diversity, as an opportunity for cultural exchange and growth.
Thank you. See if there are any other responses to this before we move on to our next question.
Yeah, I would like to answer if that's okay. Well, especially going after you, Lana, I think it's very on point. In El Paso, as some of you may know, El Paso is one of the largest ports of entry in not just the country, but the world. And our city is so connected to our sister city in the Mexican side, Juarez, that are, the port of entry actually takes you from the downtown in Juarez to the downtown in El Paso. So immigration is inherently part of our work and everything that we do at Amanecer. So I just want to share quickly a story of how I've seen this play out in my community while canvassing near the refinery in El Paso. We'll be talking to people whose backyards literally have a view, a front seat view of that refinery. They'll tell me I can smell like rotten eggs all the time. I have really bad asthma, cancer rates. But when I'll ask them, who do you think is to blame? They'll point to the border and they'll blame our neighbors on the Juarez side, on people who burn tires in the winter to keep warm, migrants who leave trash behind in what used to be a river as they cross, instead of naming the refinery and Marathon Petroleum as the culprit for the poisoning of our community, right? So the way that we've been tackling this, tackling this disconnection in our community is by taking our members through what we call the power analysis. So understanding who has power in our community, what is their self-interest, and how are they wielding that power to enact their vision of the world, and what can we as El Pasoans, as Amaneceristas, as we call ourselves, do to build the community power that we need to change the system. So it's our voice and our input that's guiding those decisions, right? So I just want to really emphasize that I think that the only way that we'll break through these isolation and individualistic narratives that they're pushing our people into these anti-immigrant rhetorics is through these honest conversations about power and pushing our people to want to build more power together.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, you've shared some of the things that aren't working, what's working, what needs to shift. I want to talk a bit about sort of the strategic future and narrative shift and the work of the OYF and the future work of the OYF. Over the past 10 years, right, the Opportunity Youth Forum has been focused on changing systems that have historically been harmful to youth and young adults of color. Through amazing work, and I'll just name a few, right? The work of the Healing-Centered Youth Organizing, right? Focusing not on trauma-centered and trauma-informed, but healing-centered, healing-informed, right? Mind, healing the mind, healing the hearts, healing the body. The work of Fresh Tracks in centering indigenous practices in well-being and being responsible stewards of the land, and newer body of work, BMWP, which has themes here about belonging, meaning-making, well-being, and purpose. And so as we think about the next 10 years, right, at the forum, we aim to invest in strategies that promote greater belonging, meaning-making, well-being, and purpose for young adults, while focusing on changing the harmful, pernicious, and racist narratives that live at the heart of authoritarianism and fascism. And so I'll direct this question to Sequoia and Asana. What must we consider as we refine our strategy at OYF in the years ahead, and which narratives must we focus on changing in our equity and justice work?
All right, I'll go ahead. I believe in the next 10 years, we must be honest with ourselves. We must look ourselves in the eye, look our neighbors, and hold each other's hands to say, we can do this. And also just piggybacking on what you all stated before, we have to be real that this system was never made for us. It was forged, the idea was forged without us even at the table. We were told to make our own table, and they stole it from us. And even with that, Black and brown communities, we share unity in our exclusivity. That although we were absent, although we were told no, although we were told this isn't your fight, it very much is. And that we must break down the narratives for the Black community that we can't, that it won't affect us, that, it's far in the distance, but it's not. It's here now. It's here today, yesterday, and it will always be here unless we sit down and have an honest conversation with ourselves on what we can do in our communities, in our schools, with our friends, even when you're at the bar. Hey, what do you see going on today? And you talk about it. And then with that, you're able to implement and create those strategies to create sustainable changes in your community. And with that, like I said before, we need to be rooted in healing and healing justice to promote those narratives that allow us to be our authentic selves while also forging a new system that is created for us and by us.
Thank you. Sequoia.
To build a future that actually works for everybody, especially young people, definitely agreeing that we need to center healing justice. That means recognizing that mental health is real and it's not separated from our work. It's foundational. If young people are going to be able to step into leadership and organizing, they need spaces that honor their healing, not just their labor. Because we don't support mental health and healing, that's when we see burnout. We can't afford that, especially in tribal communities where there's so many ongoing issues that need to be addressed and changed. We can't have our young leaders burning out early, especially when they're just starting to step into their power. One thing we've learned is that the importance of developing emotional intelligence at a younger age. It helps us to navigate different community spaces with more intention and maturity. Like understanding that in movement work, there's no permanent allies, no permanent enemies. That kind of clarity helps us focus on the work instead of getting caught up in the personal conflict or the ego of it all. And let's be real, our generation is incredibly resilient. We've lived through so much in such a short amount of time, and yet we continue to show up in these spaces. So here's what actually needs to change. Stop hearing the youth out and just actually listen. Value what we say, understand that different communities need different approaches, and a one-size-fits-all approach will not work. If we want inclusive systems, we have to build them in partnership from youth from the ground up, with care, with listening, and space for healing and sustainability.
Thank you. I keep thinking about, and I apologize, I forget the name of the great panelist this morning from Tay, who was talking about, we invited them to our table, right? Didn't work so well, so we went to their table. And sometimes, even if we build the table and we invite, right, the table may not be the right size, may not be the right height, right? It may be a little too cold, right? So how do we build the table together, or better yet, just sit at the table that you build for us, right? And I think at the forum, for as long as I've known the forum, have had the pleasure, right, to collaborate and now work as a colleague at the forum, they've always sought to understand what does that table look like, right? That young people need, that young people want, and how do we sit at their table and not just invite them to sit at ours. I want to invite Ana and Asana to share a bit about your vision for the future and roadmap for how we get there, right? The OYF is envisioning the next 10 years, right? And so we know that there will be a roadmap together. What's your vision for that?
Sure, thank you. Well, my vision for the future is one where everyday people are the decision makers over the choices that affect our lives, and that every community across our country is organized enough so we can create a new vision for our country, a new world to live in. And one where our health and our well-being is prioritized over profit, most importantly. And the way that we get there is through disciplined power-building organizing across generations and across the country that has a clear analysis of why we're in the position that we're in right now and how to get ourselves out of this moment. Power organizations are the most effective tool to turn the resources that we have into the power that we need to build the world that we deserve. And these organizations are essential to the movement's success because otherwise the status quo that profits from our exploitation will continue to remain intact. So I'm really grateful for spaces like this one and organizations like the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing, who are really clear about what it'll take to get there, and that this type of work can't just happen in El Paso or in LA. And this vision of the world of the future, it relies on every community building real structured organizations that are focused on building power and winning the future we deserve through shared standards of what it means to do good organizing. And this work needs to be strategic with long-term plans, so we're moving beyond reactionary, spontaneous actions that may feel like we've won something, may feel good, but in reality we haven't really moved the needle in our favor. So we really need to get serious about that power-building aspect.
Thank you.
When I think about the future, I think about how we need to take action. We need to be unafraid. We need to be unafraid to get in trouble, in good trouble, necessary trouble to redeem the soul of this country. That we must understand that passive acceptance to injustice is ineffective. That we cannot continue to take what they give us, then we must fight back. And I also think about kind of like what you said with El Paso and the pollution going on. I think to my home city in Memphis about how my neighborhood, one of the oldest and blackest neighborhoods in Memphis, is threatened by Elon Musk promoting his XAI building. How he has implemented 35 turbines but only has permits for 15 and continues to expand and build. How my grandmother came down here from the mass exodus, my great-grandmother rather, and she laid down a foundation for our family. We've been here for a whole generation, my mother and my father, but we are threatened by pollution, by cancer rates, by diseases. And how even though we continue to fight, it feels like our fight is futile. But that I see the vision, I see the future, and in this roadmap, I see us as a collective continuing to fight for what is right. My neighborhood, we are in the beginning stages of this organizing fight, but we are not letting down. We continue to ask and have these town hall meetings and ask our neighbors, what can we do to fight? And in the future, in the roadmap, I see us doing that, to sit down, to organize, to lean on each other, and be honest with ourselves that the existing strategies we are using today aren't working, that this is a different beast, but that we can look back towards the past, our ancestors that were organizing way before we knew what it was, and that we know and we continue to implement those strategies and to build sustainable changes. We continue to challenge the policies that bring us down, that wants to hold us down, that want us to be silent. But just like me and my neighborhood, we won't back down. We won't be silent. We will continue to fight for what is right because we are tired. But also, we will promote a new system rooted, again, in healing and love and justice so that our generation after us, our children, can know what our fight was about, they can appreciate it, and that they can also use those tools to build their fight. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear this question from earlier in the panel, that it sounds like you're also saying we've got to continue to ask ourselves, what are we doing right, what are we not doing right, and be willing, right, to stop, dismantle what we're not doing right, and build together. Thank you for that. I want to open up just for a few minutes before we move on to audience Q&A to you as a panel. What themes, tensions, or shared truths are you hearing across each other's responses, comments? You all on the panel or in the moments where we've been sort of just talking and vibing before the panel? What are you hearing? What are you sharing? What's challenging you? What's inspiring you?
Well, I'll start. I would just say one thing, I am very honored to be here. Thank you to the Children's Defense Fund and BSLN for inviting me here. And I also believe that just coming here in this shared space today, I've become an even better leader, that I would take what I know and continue to put in my community. And just hearing you all, and being from the South, being from Memphis, and going to school with the people that I am, I just hear that we are all kind of facing the same challenges of injustice. And that even with our communities, we come from different spaces, that we share the same passion to fight for what is right. And even then, like what you said in El Paso and how I related that back to Memphis, that it's not necessarily the same fight, but it's in different fonts. And that it's up to us to erase and create our own stories. And even what you were saying about your trip to Romania, and how they were reading the letters from the Birmingham jail. And just last week, I was able to sit down with a Black Panther, and he was able to tell me his life story about being jailed, being beaten during the Civil Rights Movement, and how even then, he grew up in a Catholic school, but one of his teachers, one of the priests, wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King and telling him that what he was doing was wrong, and that how he was just in close proximity to that, but then how he poured into me that you have to be unafraid to fight for what's right, that you may not have a seat at the table that you thought you were, but that the fight is bigger than you, that you have to continue to push that effort and share it with others.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else want to share what's inspiring you?
Okay. So I feel like, I'm so glad to be, and I'm honored to be on a panel with all of you guys. I am very I'm very proud of our alignment in how we see things. Of course, it's in different fonts, and our perspectives are not that different. I would like to say that I want to call into the community, into the space, humanity, and the fact that we were once youth too. We've all felt some sort of injustice some way or another, and the feelings are the same. And I've said this in a different room, but those feelings are the same. But it is up to us to work together and find a new path and move forward. And again, as a human, like, I put my trust out there to you guys and everybody else in the room to, like, you know, reach out to us, that we are here and we continue to show up outside of our daily life and our hustle to survival because we care and we worry about what's ahead. But we still have a bit of hope in us, or a lot of hope, or however, maybe in pizzazz, to, you know, keep it moving, keep it fighting, making it a difference. And it is up to the adults to engage us, but it's also up to us to move forward, again, putting accountability on both sides. But yeah, I encourage you guys to, you know, really connect to the youth around you. We're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe what we can do is, I have had the pleasure of getting to know these folks for I think over a month now. Some of you I already knew. And I've had the pleasure of asking you questions. I want to share that pleasure and privilege. So I want to open it up right now to the audience. Any questions? Doesn't have to be questions. It can, or a question from a panelist.
No. Before questions, I want to share with you what inspires me also, because it's my first time in an event like this and in a panel like this, no? So I feel so empowered today to raise my voice, you know, to speak in front of all of you, that it's a lovely community. I feel like so I don't know if it's the correct word, but spoiled by you, you know, so I really enjoy this experience. One powerful moment that we live for me was visiting the site visits, visiting the LGBT Center and Homeboy Industries with Diego, the Opera Club that it's here. Seeing firsthand the dynamics, the people impact, and the gratitude for the spaces was deeply moving. I'm living inspired by immense impact they've had in their communities and full of ideas that we can act together. So please give me all your numbers and your and your emails. So yeah. Other thing that was so beautiful. So we find connection through art. Through music. So music, this powerful language that unites us as humanity. We feel the rhythm within that link us to something transcendent that we maybe cannot understand, but we feel in our skin, our minds. So as we experienced on Monday night with Las Cafeteras, dancing with them. So yeah, one of my favorites band now. I call my sister, like, listen to this song. So through theater, also through muralism, like these stunning murals that I have seen in the here in the city. Film, literature, photography, and technology. I imagine that, a future where our communities live in dignity, where mobility is a right and not a sentence, and where youth are not silenced, but here as a real force for change. A future where borders are made by support networks, not walls and surveils. A future where democracy is not just a political system, but a collective way of living in equity, participation, and respect for diversity. I want to share very quickly one impactful experience that I have of my adolescent related to this way to address relationships between technology, power, knowledge, inequality, and the gaps between our nations. This experience was watching Carne y Arena. This is an immersive VR visual reality short by famous Mexican director González Iñárritu, where I experienced what migrants go through, being held at gunpoint, seeing a mother with her baby in the desert. It was really heartbreaking, especially knowing those were real stories. Migrants fleeing not just for dignity, but to survive in context of violence, the mass recruitment by organized crime, climate change, disasters, etc. So let's have all these tools from arts to technology, allow for deep empathy, and bring the conversation for everyone.
Thank you.
So I think it's right to ask you to, with your whole hearts, please thank them. Thunderous applause, make some noise, please. I'm thinking about truth-telling, and I'm thinking about calling people out and calling people in, and the tension that we must hold as we think about how the colonizer lives within us and how we have to do our own internal work to make sure that we are not part of the system of oppression, and just how difficult that is as we still try to do this work. And so I just feel so grateful and thankful for all of the truth-telling. And then the other thing that I'm thinking a lot about is, again, it was so intentional, the design of spending time hearing that national, state, et cetera perspective, hearing from the LA Collaborative this morning, and then the so what of all of that being here in this conversation. And so the things sitting in my heart, the questions are, what do you do with what you just heard? How does it fit into what you learned? And as you return home, what meaning will you make of the different ways learning has unfolded, but most important, the truth it just got to be situated in this conversation. And then the final thing that I want to do before I turn this over to Steve is I want to connect some dots between the conversation we had this morning and the conversation we had just now. So if you all have been with us in the past, and particularly the last time we were in California, we were in San Francisco, and we had the honor and privilege of having Angela Glover Blackwell, the founder of Policy Link, with us. And Angela talks about two different types of leaders doing work in this moment. If you thought about the morning plenary, this is the type of leader that she notes is working within the system. So when Angela, who was on the panel this morning, said, I want to be the person identified as someone who fills in the gap. I do not see red tape. I do not see barriers. These are all our children, and I'm thinking outside of the box so that they all feel loved. Or Mary said, with so much tenderness, her job was to stop the harm and to stop the trauma. Those are the people, Angela says, they work in the system today. They are doing that internal organizing transformation that's necessary. And then there are the other people that we need. These are the people that Dr. Ruha Benjamin calls the story makers. So there's a difference, right? We got storytellers. It's how we know the past. It's how we understand what our ancestors did. It is the meaning Azana makes or Sequoia makes of the organizing that came before us that made today possible. But the story makers, they live in their imagination because they're doing the work of building for tomorrow. And the vision that they hold is so much bigger than what we can even imagine or conceive now, because their job is to imagine what is unimaginable. Those are the story makers. So if you think about the conversation this morning and the conversation right now, that's really the difference. We need people inside the system stopping the harm, stopping the trauma, and then we need the story makers creating new stories that we can't even dream of or imagine today. And that is the conversation we had this morning, coupled with the conversation that we had just now. Here's what I want to say before I turn it over to Steve. What I want to say is that it's so important, the idea of love. We've been talking about love. And I want to make sure in closing that we are really, really clear. I think it's been heard. I feel like the thread has been pulled, but I want to make sure that we are all clear that love is this sentimental, sometimes it gets not confused, but maybe felt and understood as mushy. We are talking about love in action. When I mention people like Ida B. Wells, when I mention people like, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, what you must know if you didn't know is that Ida B. Wells stood on the front lines of stopping lynching. They burnt down her home, they burnt down her office, and she refused to give up the fight because she was gonna make sure that the policy made it into law that it would be illegal to stop the lynching. That's the kind of love that I am talking about. That's what this is rooted in. Sojourner Truth was very, very clear that we are going to pass legislation around voting rights, around civil rights, and her work made the very first civil rights law possible in the early 19th century. Again, story makers. So when I talk about love and love in action, that is what it's rooted in. And it's really important that we can hold that and we understand that, even as the work that we're doing at Aspen today is very, very much rooted in continuing to support organizing, continuing to support community power building. The thing that I want to name is that one of the energies of white supremacy is to create chaos, to make you feel like you're supposed to be doing all of these things. And it's true, it's very important we're organized and we have some objectives and we're very, very clear. And we're clear about the piece that we're doing in the broader landscape. And so the piece that we will continue to work on, to be very, very clear, is continuing to support community power building, everything that you heard here today. We're going to continue to support youth organizing. We're going to continue to support young people who are dreaming and working every day to achieve their goals and their dreams, educations, careers, socioeconomic mobility, civic engagement, all of that is what we're going to continue to fund. And then here's the thing. Brian Stevenson said, a lot of people think this, but the North won the Civil War, but they lost the war on narrative change. And so what we recognize is that the policies that we have lifted up, all of the change in the systems, that will continue to be our work, yes. And we're gonna go even deeper on narrative change, and that will be a big part of our fight as well over the next 10 years, because we recognize that these pernicious, harmful, racist narratives continue to exist and continue to divide us, and so that will also be a part of our work as well. We are very clear that these times, I'm not gonna call them unprecedented, because I think they have been in the making for generations, but we're also not naive about what's happening, and we recognize that it will take all of us. And we want to be clear where we are situated so that we're doing the best that we can, using the best of our abilities, the best of our network, to do our very, very best work, stopping the harm today and supporting the story makers to create the future that we all deserve. So thank you for being with us to make those new stories.
Sincere thank you to Monique Miles for her leadership. And in classic Mo fashion, she's like, I'm just going to say a couple of things, and then you're going to do a call to action. I think the call to action has been covered. But I'll just put an exclamation point on a lot of what Monique said, and I think love is so important. Do you feel that, right? Like, I think this community lies in stark contrast to some of what I see happening in the world, in our country. I made the mistake last night of watching some of the footage of Marco Rubio testifying in front of the Senate about Afrikaner refugees and some of that stuff, and watching the Secretary of Homeland Security just not understand the concept of habeas corpus. And yeah, I think that's right. I gotta quote Kendrick again. Yeah. And it's frightening. It's a kind of a frightening time. And I know a lot of folks in this room are feeling that, seeing that. I think often in totalitarian states, there's a kind of piece right now, I encourage you to read, short piece in The Atlantic about kind of two states that someone who escaped Nazi Germany documented. And so you kind of have this appearance of the norm, but then someone can be pulled off the street or even out of the courts and mistreated by the state. And so I think we have to be conscious of what's happening in real time and react. And so it's a little bit like, it keeps falling on folks who have always struggled for equity and justice to do the work. And so part of my call to action is to say, really in a different way, check your privilege. Because those of us who carry more privilege, and you can determine whether you're in that category or not, but those who have privilege have even greater responsibility now to stand in solidarity and to fight for the fairness and justice in this space. So we need to do that, and it's not fair to ask this network. I think we always have talked about self-care, and that's number one, self-care. Number two is care for community. We're community-based folks. It's all about the work to transform the systems in our communities. And now we're saying, and thirdly, to the extent you can, we gotta raise our heads, we gotta step out into the streets. Just before Kendrick, there was the Doobie Brothers taking it to the streets. And boots on the ground. Thank you, Jamil. And I think it's just something that falls on us. So if not us, who? And I think that's why we wanted to have folks like the Brennan Center with us, who are really working hard to strive for a more perfect union, even as imperfection and othering is rearing an ugly, ugly head right now. And so lastly, in 2016, after that election, there were a lot of emails going out from a lot of folks, and total respect to everyone in this work, saying now more than ever, this work is more important. And I did not want to say that. I didn't think it was, I think I wanted to, so what we ended up saying, to quote another great black feminist leader, we ended up saying we want to live up to what Emmett Till's mother said when he was brutally murdered by the powers that be, which is now, I have not a moment to waste. I will work for justice the rest of my life. And so with that, the work you do in community is deeply grounded and rooted in justice. I hope we can collectively connect to others, lock arms with folks we've never locked arms with before in solidarity, to move forward, to experience and witness and participate in the beloved community that we all aspire for. So thank you for all the work you do to go towards that direction, and thank you for doing that bit more in the days ahead. We will see many of you in Aspen in October, and we will lock arms with you then. Thanks, everybody. Anything else? All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, y'all.